Hey everyone, welcome back to Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite. I am your host, Jim Chapman, and today I am investigating what we know as it relates to the case that is absolutely everywhere right now. And that is the case of Nolan Wells. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with this case, Nolan Xavier Wells was an 18-year-old from Ocean Springs, Mississippi. He was a recent graduate of Ocean Springs High School, and he was a college freshman and also a wide receiver at Southwest Mississippi Community College. He was very well respected, very popular, very well put together young man in the prime of his life. Now, on July 4th of 2026, he joined some friends on a boat trip to what is known as Horn Island. This is a popular undeveloped barrier island. It's about 8 to 10 miles off the coast of Mississippi. He was last seen around 3 p.m. near the northwestern tip of that island wearing blue swim trunks. Later that afternoon, his friends returned to the mainland without Nolan Wells, and his mother, Christine Wansley, she reports him missing later that night after a friend called around 11 p.m. This would launch a multi-agency search involving the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, the U.S. Coast Guard, National Park Service, and volunteers like the Cajun Navy. And on the morning of July 6th, a park ranger would discover a body matching Wells' description face down in the water near a shoreline at the island's northwestern tip. It was positively identified through his dental records the following day. Now, what has occurred since? Well, a frenzy to get answers. And in the midst of all of this, in my opinion, the memory of this young man is getting tarnished along the way. That, again, in my opinion, has been launched by people who, despite what they are saying, to me, it does not appear as though they have the family's best interest at heart. And that's just my thoughts on the outside. So today, what you're going to hear is a complete other side of this, based completely off the witnesses that were there that day. Not conjecture, not hyperbole, just the facts as presented by those who are in the center of this case, a case that they never thought they would find themselves in. And it's important to say that this is the direct account of Nolan's best friend and his exact recollection of these events. So let's get into it. And we're going to start off on the day of July 4th, 2026, and Nolan Wells with a group of 20 to 30 friends. They were all excited to ring in America's 250th birthday by heading out to a popular spot called Horn Island. Now, this trip had been planned for weeks, and everyone was excited. They had been there before. As a matter of fact, July 4th of the previous year, all of them, including Nolan Wells. They were a very tight-knit group, and it consisted of both white kids and black kids. And I mention this because there are so many inaccurate, frustrating reports going around right now that Nolan was the only black kid among this group of friends. That is what we call in the industry a lie. It's not true. There were mixed race kids and there were other black kids in that friend group. This large friend group, not a small friend group. Now, amongst this large group of friends was his best friend, who is in fact white. And they head out to this island. So that day, 3 boats and these 20 plus peeps, they all head that way, all great friends. And this was after they all met up at what is known as Fort Wyatt boat launch. They all leave that boat. They arrive at the island at the very same time. And when they get there, it is freaking packed. We're talking 3,000 plus people on this island, completely circling it. And y'all, this 8 to 10 miles is how big this island is. And it was so packed, the boats alone that were out there, they were parked 3 deep, if you will, completely circling this island. And the area of the island where Nolan was with this massive group of friends, there was approximately 1,000 people in that area. And that's important because when you hear reports from certain individuals, they allude to or they cause people to believe Nolan Wells was on this deserted island with 3 or 4 white dudes. And that is a total lie because it just ain't true. 1,000 people just on his side of the island. So the boys get there and it's party city, right? All of these kids, I am sure, are loving it. You're having some beers. You're seeing pretty ladies in bikinis. You're 18 years old. What could be better? You got great music. You're having a great time on the water, which incidentally, great day for boating. Water was relatively flat and calm on the way in. There was plenty of sunshine. And when they get there around 10:30 a.m., the party's already hopping. Thousands of people. And this is a massive island, y'all. I keep pressing that, but keep that in mind. This is not a little sandbar that's a football field wide. So they tie up the boats and some people stay on the boats and most people jump right in the water, which it's about waist deep to chest deep, depending on where you're standing in that water. There are some steep drop-offs as you walk along that island. And these kids, they do what kids do. The crowd gets larger. Other friends would arrive in different boats. And so everyone is kind of traveling throughout the water. Picture that. Boats everywhere, kids, waist deep water to chest deep water, walking from boat to boat. Hey man, I ain't seen you since high school. Those sorts of things, talking to everybody. And again, these are people from this area, a lot of them from the Ocean Springs area, and they knew these islands. They didn't just party there, they fished there during the weekends, some of them even during the week. Everyone's drinking, having a good time, including Nolan, according to reports. They're taking selfies. They're smiling from ear to ear. Nobody pissed. Nobody having a bad time. So let's fast forward to about 3 o'clock or so that day. And the boat Nolan was in, out of the 3 associated with their friend group, starts taking on water. Now, to explain this, what basically occurred is when you have these parties, or if a bunch of people are getting in and out of your boat, okay, you're going to take on water into that boat as people step in and out. And as people are stepping in, water's coming in with them. And the more people you have in the boat, the more the boat sinks into the water, right? That water would kind of splash into the bilge area of that boat where the motor is located and the transom and all those sorts of things. The bilge area is where the batteries are located. And this is completely normal with any boat that you got to kind of watch that. And that's why they make bilge pumps, because it pumps the water out of the bilge. It just flushes it out of there. So one of these kids goes back there during this time and he notices, there's a lot of water back here. And he also notices that this water is getting really close to the batteries, which you definitely do not want. That's kind of an emergency that we need to get this water out of here. The boat is sinking. So they also tried to trim the boat motor down, which basically means put the boat motor into the water, and it wouldn't trim down. So they've got a problem. Now their motor won't trim down, and it's panic city. These kids are like, holy crap, this boat is actually sinking. So at this point, one of the friends looks over at Nolan, and he's got a girl in his arms, and her name is Katie. Beautiful girl, his age, and they had just met from what I understand that day. And he tells Nolan, hey, we got to go, bro. The boat's about to sink. And Nolan, being like any other 18-year-old in the world who has a beautiful girl that he just met, that he's trying to talk to, he's like, y'all go ahead. I'm going to stay on the island. I'll catch a ride back with somebody else. Something important to mention here. All of these kids knew each other. Obviously, that 30-person friend group were really good friends, but there were people all over that island they knew and they were talking to. And so it is common for these guys and gals to get rides back with other boats. And I don't blame Nolan. He's got a beautiful girl there he's trying to talk to. y'all go ahead. I'm going to stay behind and see what's up. His friends, meanwhile, they were kind of in real trouble there with this boat. So they do some working on the boat. This takes some time. Nobody's concentrating at this point on Nolan. He's already decided he ain't getting back on the boat. So they're focusing on keeping this boat from sinking. They call some friends of theirs who had other boats, and they're like, hey, can you tow us kind of out a little bit away from all this frenzy of people? And they had a plan. Their plan was, we're going to pull the plug out of the boat and we're going to like floor this thing, not floor it, but pull, full throttle, because you have a boat. We're going to go full throttle. We're going to do what is known in boating as planing out, and that water is going to run out of that plug. And at that point, you stop the boat, and then you jump in the water and you put the plug back in and you're good. How do I know this so well? Many years ago, as a matter of fact, I might have been 18 at that time. Me and my best friend at that time, we're going fishing in what is known as Lake Verret in South Louisiana. And we go out there and we go fishing. Now, one thing about Lake Verret is it's full of gators. I mean, full of gators, but it's got great fishing. So we're out there, we're fishing in Lake Verret. I'm not kidding you when I say every 2 feet, there was an alligator sunning on the banks of this massive Lake Verret. But we're South Louisiana boys, right? Alligators don't bother us as long as they're not chewing on us. And so we're fishing. We're having a great time. Well, both of us get a bite at the same time, and we're fishing in what's known as all-weld boats. This is like a 15-foot all-weld aluminum boat. My friend is on the back of the boat. I'm on the front, and I make a big mistake, and that is I went to the back of the boat to try to catch my fish and reel it in. My friend was already back there, and the whole back of the boat sunk. The whole motor almost went underwater. Now, my friend, who was smarter than me then and smarter than me now, knew exactly what to do. And the first thing he says to me is, get to the front of the boat now. And to explain to you, we were both big guys at that time. My friend was actually a strong safety for LSU. He was playing for LSU at that time, my best friend. And I was about 220 pounds at that time, built like a brick shithouse. And so we were a lot of weight back there when you have us and a boat motor. So I run to the front of the boat. He jumps out of the boat with the alligators in the water, pulls the plug, jumps back in, and we full throttle and planed out, and all that water went out of that plug. We did the exact same thing they did. Now, the time that had passed between the time that they noticed the boat was sinking and they got to a point where they could plane out and get that water after they took off was about an hour and a half. They actually left at 4:30 from that island. And that's important because the last time that they saw Nolan was around 3 o'clock. And these are from all reports of these kids, of this friend group. All of them say 3 o'clock. There's no conflicting story there. So they leave. And again, I need to say Nolan elected to remain on the island, and that island at the time, still not deserted. When they left, there was as many people there as when they got there. And it's at this point I want to address something else that has been totally misrepresented by the people who apparently have never been boating before and partied on a sandbar. And when you're doing this, you don't take your cell phone off the boat. Yes, it's true. Cell phones are waterproof, but I don't know many people that want to test that theory, number one, especially in salt water. But I'll take it even a step further. If you drop your phone 10 miles offshore into the ocean where the water you're standing in is waist deep to chest deep, depending on where you're standing, it's gone. Bye-bye cell phone. And everybody who boats with any regularity, and Nolan would be included in that, knows that. The fact is, at the point that boat was about to sink, no one, including Nolan, was thinking about Nolan's cell phone. So that's why the phone was still on the boat. Now, Nolan stays behind. His friends at the time, they get that idea to get another boat to tow them away. Of course, they pull the plug and they head back to the mainland. So the day goes into night, and Nolan's bestie, at some point, he's like, man, Nolan never came by to get his cell phone or his keys, which he didn't take his keys with him boating because, again, you're not going to risk losing your keys out there. What if you drop your keys in the water? These things are thought of by people that grew up in boats. They know those things. You don't need your keys out there. Your car's not out there. You're in a boat. It makes complete sense. But of course, some of the media and some of the people involved in this case bring that up as if something nefarious is going on with that. It is not. It's completely normal for people that actually boat. But around 11 o'clock p.m., his bestie gets really concerned. He tells another friend, he says, I'm going to call Nolan's mom and see if she knows what's up. Now, he didn't have Nolan's mom's cell phone number. He actually called someone else to get that. He then calls Nolan's mother, tells her, hey, we don't know where Nolan's at. Have you heard from him? His mother, I don't know exactly how she responded back, but I'm assuming she said, no, I didn't realize he was missing. And so they have that conversation. He hangs up. And then the second thing he did, his bestie, was he called the Coast Guard. And it's important to note, at this point, he is not thinking Nolan is dead. He's more along the lines of thinking that maybe whatever group that he decided to boat back with, maybe they had a breakdown on the boat. That happens all the time, y'all, all the time. Or maybe he got stuck out there somehow. Maybe he couldn't find someone to bring him back. Whatever it was, he wanted to get to the bottom of it. His best friend, the one that they were originally accusing of having something to do with his death. Same one that called Nolan's mother. Let me tell you something. If you had something to do with somebody's death, the last thing you're going to do is call the person's mother. That's absolutely ridiculous. So his bestie calls the Coast Guard. And in the meantime, between all of this, Nolan's mother, she reports him missing to authorities. This is around 11:49 p.m. on July 4th. So as you would expect, the morning of July 5th rolls around. It'd be real hard to search out there at night. Early in the morning, all hands are on deck, including his bestie and his group of friends that went out there the night before. They all head out to the island to search. Nolan's father also went out by boat early that morning with Nolan's football coach to search themselves. Multiple other agencies and private vessels were also on the scene or arriving. You're talking the National Park Service, Jackson County vessels, Biloxi Fire, Civil Air Patrol planes, Jackson County helicopters. And later in the day, the family, and this is important to mention, the family of Nolan Wells contacts the United Cajun Navy, which is based out of where I am recording this episode right now, to help with the search effort. So everyone was in on finding this young man. Also, all the friends who were with Nolan, they get interviewed during this time, and Nolan's mother would post a public appeal for any information on what happened to her son. Now, there's something I intentionally skipped over that I'm going to tell you about right now. I mentioned earlier that Nolan's keys and cell phone were still with his friend group. Well, around 11:07 p.m. on July 4th, after Nolan's family checked the locations for Nolan, his mother apparently had Life 360, or someone in his family did. They were able to track the location of the phone, and it showed that phone back on land. Now, the mother of Nolan's close friend, Javon, who was also friends with Nolan's best friend, the mother of Javon, as well as like 8 kids, they show up to go pick up the phone at these friends' house. But what's strange is they basically bust in the door. They didn't even knock. Scared the shit out of the kids, to be quite honest. And they demanded this phone, which these kids got no problem with that. They hand over the phone. There's some reports out there that say Nolan's father, in the meantime, was trying to get Nolan's keys, and according to reports, he had said, and I don't have any verification on this, but according to reports from others, he had said that they kind of gave him some shit about the keys. They didn't give him any shit about the keys. They couldn't find the keys initially. They didn't know where Nolan had left them in the house. Someone all of a sudden figures out, oh, they're on top of the Xbox, the gaming system. They give him the keys and he leaves. They had no reason to keep his vehicle or keep his cell phone. And they give all that over. But it has been twisted to where it's contributed to this narrative that we're going to get into. Now, once the phone was recovered, the family said they went through it and they found no photos or no saved snaps from July 4th on his Snapchat accounts, which they say was unusual for him. He typically documented these social gatherings like kids do. They said they opened it before the normal 24-hour expiration window for snaps, and they kind of viewed this as concerning. And I get that from a family standpoint, but they automatically jumped to, oh, someone's deleted all of his snaps. However, all of these friends in his friend group totally deny this, and they all state, we didn't even know Nolan's password for his phone to get into it. And how many people out there would know your friends' passwords to their phone? I got hundreds of friends. I don't know none of their passwords. And even if they did, they said, we don't have any reason to do that, and I believe them. But rest assured, nothing is really deleted on a cell phone that the police can't extract later on. So don't be shocked, folks, when they're able to extract cell phone information and figure out there's nothing out of pocket here. So let's go to Sunday, July 6th. Around 8:45 a.m., a Jackson County sheriff named John Ledbetter, he confirmed authorities had received a call reporting a body had been found. And it's been reported that a U.S. Park Service ranger discovered the body of Nolan Wells on the northwestern tip of Horn Island in the water along the shoreline in the same general area where Nolan was last reported seen on July 4th. And it was also near strong rip currents on that island. And now the body was face down. Nolan was wearing only swim trunks, blue swim trunks, which were consistent with what he was last seen and photographed wearing earlier on July 4th. And there was a conflicting report. The United Cajun Navy, the head of that, actually originally said he was fully clothed. Now, he was up in a helicopter hundreds of feet up, right? So he can only see so much, but he misstated and said he was fully clothed. He was not, and he recanted that later. The second he did that, all of a sudden people were saying the United Cajun Navy had something to do with it. Insanity. We'll get into that later. But Nolan's family, they get asked to come out to the boat launch. They were met by the sheriff and the coroner. This is just after 11 a.m. that day. The body then gets transported to the coroner's office in Pascagoula. This is just before 1 p.m. that day, and it wasn't long later that the family confirmed on social media the body found was Nolan. Now, early the next day, the identification was confirmed via dental records by the coroner. So early official statements at that time indicated no apparent signs of foul play at the scene and that drowning was suspected, which unfortunately is not rare in that area. And before I get into that, let me tell you, they're basically looking at this body. They didn't see any gunshot wounds. They didn't see any obvious signs of trauma. They didn't see any stab wounds, things like that. But an autopsy, an in-depth autopsy, would take place. Now, in the meantime, some things about that island in particular. There are at least a couple of drownings in this area every single year due to the rip currents that exist. Exactly and especially in that spot where Nolan Wells was found. Now, at this point, the family, they wanted to do the exact thing I would have wanted to do. They want to get an independent autopsy, which I totally get it. This is your baby. You want to make sure not only that someone didn't totally screw up, but that nothing nefarious is going on or nothing got missed. And Colin Kaepernick, the former quarterback for the 49ers, he says, hey, he stepped up and said, hey, I'll pay for it. And I think that's pretty awesome of him. Now, y'all, by this time, this story was everywhere, and I was following along. And I was absolutely elated that they had found this young man, but very saddened that he was not alive. I was happy that at least the family at a minimum would have a body, because it's not guaranteed you're ever going to find that body. And then I learned the family had gotten a lawyer, and this lawyer is a well-known civil rights attorney by the name of Ben Crump. And that kind of confused me a lot, because Ben Crump, in my opinion, Jim Chapman's opinion, is a divider. He only shows up when opposite races of people are involved. And first, I don't like division among races. I don't see black and white. I don't see color. And I know there's people out there that would say, oh, all white people say. I really don't. Really don't. Maybe it's the fact that I played football my entire life. Maybe that's what it is. But I played with black people, white people. I remember many birthday parties with my black friends that I went to growing up. And let me tell you, they were a lot funner than some of my white friends' parties, to be honest with you. They know how to throw a birthday party. And I had a ton of friends, and still have a ton of friends, that are not white. And I don't look at them as my black friends. I look at them as my friends. So I can't stand when you try to divide things among race. And yes, there are situations where race plays a part. But this early on, just because he was out there with some white people, because there were other black kids as well, doesn't mean it was a white-black thing. Now, second, nowhere in this case, in my view, did race play a part. In my view, it was the total opposite of that. It seems to me that none of these kids, including Nolan, took race into account when choosing friends, because he had a lot of white friends. So at this point, everything gets twisted in my view, so much so that these kids, his friends, they had to delete their social media due to death threats. People are threatening to kill them. And there's no evidence they had anything to do with this. Everything suddenly became about race. And it doesn't surprise me. It's right when Ben Crump got involved. Now, here's some things that Ben Crump had said during this investigation. I'm quoting him. On the need for an independent investigation and refusing to accept a quick no foul play conclusion. Quote, it's a lived experience for many black Americans that oftentimes when our children are killed in highly questionable situations, there is a notion that there was nothing wrong, no foul play, just sweep it under the rug. We refuse to let them sweep it under the rug. We refuse to let Nolan's death be in vain. We're going to make sure we get to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, because Nolan Wells deserves it. Well, you know what? Get to the truth. I think we're to the truth as it relates to these kids, as it relates to conflicting accounts about why Nolan stayed behind with this girl. Quote, they're not saying the same thing. One of them is telling the truth. One of them is not. We have to get to the bottom of this. Now, he's referring to the friend group, saying Nolan chose to stay behind, and the girl's version of this, which allegedly was that she said Nolan told her he was going back to the boat. So let's play the how to twist the truth game when you are an attorney. That girl who Nolan wanted to stay behind with, her name was Katie, and her sister spoke with reporters. And here's what she said, quote, according to Gracie, that's her sister, Katie thought Wells would have boated back to the mainland with his friends. And I stress the word thought, not knew, thought. Her sister then went on to say, quote, Katie had a conversation and assumed that Nolan was getting ready to get on the boat he came out on. You hear that word in the quote, assumed. And she went on to say, quote, Katie assumed the friends telling him to get on the boat would not have left him. There's that word again, assumed. Nowhere in that statement did you hear what Crump would like you to believe, which is that Katie saw him get on the boat. What he possibly said, and I'm talking about Nolan here, and of course nobody knows, But what he possibly said to her was, I'm going to go see if my friends left yet, and they had already left, and he didn't know that. Or maybe he said, I'm going to get on the boat, and didn't realize they had already left. Maybe he said that to her. But the fact is, they had already left. So some other things that Crump said. On the phones being left behind, he said, quote, what teenager wouldn't take their phone? It's not adding up at all. Well, first of all, he did take his phone. We've already covered that. It was on the boat, in the console of the boat. And I've already explained to you why he didn't take his phone back when they left. Number one, nobody was thinking about a phone. Number two, this is Crump clearly telling you he's not someone who goes on boats much and jumps in the water, talking about something he knows nothing about. This is so common, y'all. He also spoke about the gap between when the friends last saw Nolan at 3 o'clock when they told him, hey, we're having some problems with the boat possibly sinking. You need to get on the boat. And when the boat left at 4:30 p.m., that hour and a half. Where was Nolan for that hour, he said? Well, he was with a girl named Katie for some time of that. The estimated time she last saw him, we don't know. It hasn't come out. So I don't know. Did she last see him at 4:35 and these kids were not even on the island? Did he leave her at 3:45 and somewhere between that time and the time he was trying to get back to his boat, something happened? We don't know as of this time. Good question, though. I don't fault him for asking that. On the timing of the body being found, July 6th rather than July 5th, he said, quote, his body should have been there on July 5th. Why would it not appear until July 6th? If he stayed behind on the island, there were boats there. There were people. It's just not adding up. Now, here's the one I got the problem with the most. There's so many possibilities on that, obviously. But the most likely is, and here's the facts, when you drown, you sink because your lungs fill up with water. Now, most times, it takes 3 to 5 days after for you to surface. In Nolan's case, it was just 2 days. So there's your answer, Ben Crump. Again, casting some sort of bullshit without knowing what he's talking about. On the independent autopsy, and this was the private autopsy, Crump reported the private autopsy found the cause and manner of death undetermined pending investigation. It noted no fractures or deep tissue injuries, described a red discoloration in soft tissue at the back of the head as inconclusive, which all means it could have been caused by anything. And the report also listed multiple limitations, which we'll get into in just a second. But he was quoted after this as saying, quote, this is only another part of the puzzle. And even though it tells us significant information, we still have more questions than we have answers as of this time. So here's the sad fact, y'all. You may forever have more questions than you have answers. That's just typically how these types of cases go when there's no foul play. And so now you have had 2 autopsies, neither one showing any sort of foul play as playing a part. Inconclusive really means there's no obvious signs that there was foul play. Just means we can't conclude somebody killed this guy. We don't know exactly what happened. So I want to recount something quickly before we move on, and that is the truth and the lies in this case. It's important. Nobody has been listening to the facts here. They're running off of these headlines from these people that have no idea what they're talking about on TikTok. So the lie is Nolan was the only black kid on Horner Island. And we've already covered that. Not only were there hundreds of black kids on Horner Island on that July 4th, Nolan wasn't even the only black kid in the friend group. Another lie, Nolan's friends did not tell anyone he was missing. The truth was Nolan's friends actually are the ones who reported Nolan missing to the Coast Guard and the ones who called his own mother to tell her. Another lie, that Nolan's friends went into hiding after his disappearance and deleted all their social media. Yep, they deleted all their social media, as we covered, because it got death threats from everybody and they didn't want to see it. And they didn't go into hiding after his disappearance. As a matter of fact, the next day, they actually went to Horn Island to look for Nolan themselves. And side note here, the parents of the main people focused on in these friend groups, the parents reached out to the mother of Nolan. Reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you whenever you feel like you're ready to talk. And when Nolan's mother was asked about this, initially she said, no one's tried to contact me. And then the next day she came out and she said, oh, my bad. Basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but some 3 or 4 of these mothers did reach out. And shout out for her for doing that. And I don't fault her for making the mistake. You've got a lot on your mind. And the last thing is people trying to contact you. So I don't fault her for that. But they did, 3 or 4 of them, and she reported that, did try to contact her. So nobody's hiding the lie. Nolan was isolated during the disappearance with 3 or 4 white kids. The truth, he was among 30 people, 3 separate boats, black kids, white kids, mixed race, all among these friends. It wasn't just one black guy with 3 people. Now, one other point of contention here was during the independent second autopsy of Nolan Wells, the forensic pathologist did not receive the internal anterior neck structures, including the throat, larynx, trachea, hyoid bone, and thyroid cartilage. And many people have suggested this right here, this is proof of a cover-up. And so I'm here to tell you that no, it ain't. But full disclosure here, I'm not a pathologist, so I'm going to defer to the expert here who does a great job of explaining it.
I'm Dr. Judy Malinek. I'm a board-certified forensic pathologist, and I just watched the Nolan Wells press conference, and I wanted to share some context for everyone. Being able to definitively state the cause of death after a body has not been found for several days and has been subsequently autopsied twice with signs of decomposition is incredibly unlikely. Drowning is what's called a diagnosis of exclusion, which means that when you've got a fresh body, you want to be able to look at the body and see if there's any other causes of death for that body that is found in water that exclude the death being exclusively a drowning. So for example, if someone is shot and then thrown in the water, you'll have that gunshot and they'll be bleeding and the gunshot will be the cause of death, and the thrown in the water is not the cause of death. It's not even on the death certificate. If a person is strangled and they die from strangulation and then their dead body is thrown in the water, their body will take on water, but the cause of death is going to be strangulation, not drowning. Also for any kind of traumatic injuries. Now we got to talk about natural death for a second. If someone has a heart attack while they are swimming, and because they're having the heart attack as they're exercising in the water and they take on water and they drown, the cause of death is actually drowning, and the heart attack is listed on the death certificate under other significant conditions contributing to death. So even though the heart attack might have killed them on dry land, it might not have. Most certainly they wouldn't have drowned on dry land. So we defer to the hostile environment, which is the water, to call it a drowning. Now, identifying natural disease and identifying trauma is relatively easy in a fresh body. It can be very difficult in a decomposed body. His body was found 2 days after he disappeared, and this second autopsy done by Dr. Roger Mitchell wasn't until 4 days later. So we're dealing with quite a bit of decomposition, even if the body was refrigerated during that time. And then we have this other issue of the fact that not all the results are back. The toxicology would have been done on the fluids from the body from the first autopsy. From the second autopsy, you're going to have a lot higher alcohol levels from the decomposition caused by bacteria, not caused by drinking. So again, it's the fluid and blood from the first autopsy that really matter. And the other thing you have to consider, and there's one other important piece of information from that press conference, which is that the neck block, the portion of the neck from the front end, was missing. So Dr. Mitchell did not have a chance to examine that part of Nolan Wells' anatomy. Why is that important? Because if somebody is strangled, especially manual strangulation, the injuries are going to be to the front of the neck. There may be some redness at the back of the neck as well if, injury comes from behind, but generally this part of the neck doesn't have the major blood vessels and the airway. It's the front of the neck that does. So compression or damage to the front of the airway, that's going to be found in the neck block that is still sitting at the medical examiner's office that was not released with the body. So you may ask, is this common practice for pathologists to keep a portion of the anatomy with them at the medical examiner's office and not release it to the family? And the answer is yes. We will sometimes retain important specimens that have pathology in a jar under formaldehyde at the medical examiner's office for further examination or as evidence. And the absence of that neck block is really important because we still don't have information from the first autopsy that has not been released yet. So we don't know if it was kept out of an abundance of caution, meaning that it didn't have any findings and it was negative, or it was kept because it has findings, because there's a broken hyoid bone, or because there's hemorrhage in the strap muscles. Until we get that first autopsy report, we don't know why it's been retained. So why should anybody do a second autopsy? A second autopsy is often done in cases where there is a high-profile case such as this, or there is concern from the family for foul play, and they're just not getting answers from the medical examiner's office because the medical examiner's office is still doing their investigation and is keeping things under wraps, because if there is foul play, they have the evidence, they have the physical evidence that might be able to trap the killer, and they don't want to release that to the public. Even if there is no evidence of foul play, just the lack of evidence is evidence and is important information that might affect how people are interrogated, whether they're going to tell the truth or not the truth about what happened to him. You have to understand that the medical examiner's autopsy is legally mandated, and it is ultimately the most independent autopsy because it's not beholden to the family, it's not beholden to the prosecutor, to the police, to anybody else. It's an independent agency. So that is an independent autopsy, but it takes time. And it takes time until we get all the information back, including the toxicology report. And to answer the question, if somebody's intoxicated and they drown as a result of their intoxication, meaning that they're just, too intoxicated to be able to swim adequately, the cause of death would still be a drowning, but the intoxication would be considered a significant contributing condition. But because of what I said about alcohol forming from bacteria after death, if the body is decomposed, you have to subtract some of that alcohol because it may have been caused by bacteria and may not have been a sign of intoxication. And you can have up to 0.20 gram percent. So 0.08 is above the legal limit in most states for driving, but you can get up to 0.20 in a massively decomposed body. So it really throws you off when you have decomposition and alcohol to try to figure out whether there was alcohol on board or whether all of it's just been made by bacteria. So I hope this answers some questions about what I saw in the press conference, what other people saw as well. I will go through the autopsy, or at least the report that's been released, with a fine-tooth comb, but these are just my first impressions based on watching the press report. As always, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'll see if I can answer them. And we really need to wait for the medical examiner's report to find out what really was found at the autopsy when the body was fresh. I think that's going to clarify a lot of things.
So there you have it. To all of you spewing the bullshit online, this is common practice everywhere, whether it's Nolan Wells or Elvis Presley. Tell the truth. Quit contributing to this racism narrative that does not exist here. These were good kids, all of them, the black kids, the white kids, and this is a absolute tragedy. I feel horrible that Nolan Wells died tragically, and I feel horrible for his family, and nobody is helping by saying this was a black-white thing. These were good kids who didn't see color, all of them, including Nolan Wells. So where does this case stand right now as of this recording? Well, the FBI has been assisting with the examination of the digital evidence, including that cell phone that they claim things were intentionally deleted off of. Some people, they're going to find out, just my gut opinion here, or my gut thought, they're going to find out nothing nefarious there, but we'll wait on that. Over 60 witnesses have reportedly been interviewed. The family continues to press for a transparent investigation, and I love that, and I get that, and I would also press for that. A reward, which was initially $100,000 plus, has been increased for information, and it remains in place, and if someone is arrested or conviction of foul play is determined, then that award is going to get paid out. And look, as far as Nolan Wells' family, I totally get it. His mother seems like a very put together, awesome lady. And she wants answers. And I'm with her. I want answers for her. And I pray that she gets those answers. I personally don't see any evidence. And if everyone is being honest, neither does anyone else, that race played any part in the death of this young man. Just don't see it. But something happened to him. Could he have been killed? Absolutely. But it wasn't that friend group that did it. And all the evidence right now is not showing that. In my opinion, and of course, I have no direct knowledge. This is just knowing where they were at, knowing the circumstances of that day. My opinion, I think it's extremely possible that this kid got caught in a rip current. And when you get caught in rip currents, and you maybe have been drinking a little bit, but even if you hadn't, if you get swept out, you start panicking. And at some point, you just get tired and you drown. Everything that I'm seeing points to that. But I hope this and pray that this family gets answers. And if you have something that you know about this case, report it. Google it online. You can get all the information. I'm sure they've got tons of tip lines out there. Report it. And there you have it. Any updates, I'll keep you posted quickly. The Living in Parish magazine, which is the magazine from the area I am in, they're having a little contest, and I want to thank everyone out there who listens to the show that has voted for me thus far for this contest. I'm actually nominated for Best Content Creator. I'm going to put the link in the description of this podcast. And if you would take a minute and vote for me, if you've already voted, that's okay. From what I'm being told, you can vote once a day, every day. If you want to, you can do that. It costs nothing. It takes about 5 minutes. All you got to do is scroll to the bottom of the link, and it's going to say Best Content Creator, and you just click Jim Chapman if you like what I'm doing, and I sure would appreciate that. Check out the Patreon for commercial-free early releases, bonus episodes, and more. Patreon.com/Exposed Podcast Files. And lastly, if you want to save 30% off of Cozy Earth bed sheets, comforters, they have sleep sets for like pajamas. They have towels. Everything they make is bamboo. It is the softest, coolest fabric you've ever felt in your life. Go to CozyEarth.com, enter Exposed at checkout, and get 30% off just for my listeners. And until next time, for Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.